guys, welcome to my channel. My name is ReadingBear and I hope you are ready for some more stories. And today, we will take a look at some new Just No HOA content. If you enjoyed my content, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel and post some bear emojis in the comment. And now, let's dive right into the stories.
First one is titled, HOA President Doesn't Like the Garden We Made. So, my wife joined the HOA board a little over a year ago at the request of the HOA president. We'll call him Steve. My wife and Steve got along quite well at the start, but when she started questioning some of his decisions and gave pushback on some votes, he started to dislike her. One of their bigger fights was involving the wooden deck that was on the property. Now the deck has been an eyesore ever since we moved in 5 years ago. We enjoyed going out on the deck to have the occasional community barbecue, but the wood was getting warped, and started to become a hazard for the younger kids that would play on it. They decided to tear it down, and my wife suggested a community garden. She wanted to pull out all the stops, get some boxes for different plants, a shelf to have snacks, books, sort of as a take one, leave one sort of thing. They get around to tearing it down, and my wife is told she can buy the equipment she needs to set up the garden. Early March, she buys all the needed stuff, such as soil, boxes to up the soil in, seeds, etc. I don't remember everything, but it all costed around $500 after it's all said and done. We were able to get reimbursed for everything fairly easy. I should also mention that my wife and a few other members of the board were the ones who tore down and removed all the pieces of the deck from off the property, so they also saved a good chunk of money by not having to hire someone to do all that fun work. Turns out Steve wasn't a huge fan of how the garden turned out. Even though most the people we talked to liked it, others even donated some of their plants and one person even bought a fire pit as well. Steve was not impressed. He apparently went around telling people that it looks like a homeless camp. Now, I'll admit, it's not the greatest thing out there, but it still is pretty nice, and a lot better than what used to be there. My wife's time on the board was coming to a close. She was getting way too stressed out over her responsibilities, and having to defend some of her decisions, votes, because Steve would tell neighbors things that painted her in a bad light, so they would approach her about it. One example to give an idea. A lot of neighbors have been reporting break-ins to their vehicles, so it was proposed to buy security cameras for the parking lot. Steve was against it and suggested that they just put up fake cameras as a deterrent to the thieves. Wife explained how insane that was and got everyone other than Steve to vote in favor of actual security cameras. The next day, we get approached by multiple neighbors because Steve told them that she was the one that suggested, and got approved, that they have fake security cameras instead of real ones, which she had to clarify and bring another member of the board in who was there to back up her side of the story. With a heavy heart, my wife decided to formally resign from the HOA board last month. We found out today that Steve has decided to tear down the community garden, and my wife needs to pay the HOA back the funds that she was given to pay for the garden. To say we're livid is an understatement. We spent a good amount of the summer watering, building the garden. It's not much, just baby tomatoes, tomatillos, zucchini, blackberries and bell peppers, but we enjoyed making it. We don't really have much for recourse. My wife just got verbal approval from Steve earlier this year, which at the time they were still close, so she thought it was enough, and when she wrote the minutes down, she never brought it up that it was approved. More of a learn your lesson the hard way sort of thing and just wanted to vent. But yeah, duck HOAs. Next one is titled, Good Job, HOA. You stopped a little old lady from gardening. So, my grandma lives in a neighborhood with an HOA. She's never had a problem with them before. Until now. She loves to garden. It's one of her biggest passions. However, the HOA has a rule set in place that you can only garden in the backyard, not the front. Something to do with attracting vermin. Now, she's lived in this neighborhood for 30 years and the original HOA leader or whatever, gave her and only her permission to grow her garden in the front. Since her backyard is shaded by trees and gets no sun hardly. 30 years she's been doing that. Now, the original guy retired, replaced by some 20-year-old college student, and he's demanding she do it in the back. She tried explaining to her the old leader let her do that. But she didn't care, she demanded she do it. Grandma refused. She tried explaining that it'd kill her entire harvest if she moved them to the back, and that same woman came to her house and knocked on her door, asking her one last time to move the garden to the back. She refused and accused her of being a youngster with her head up her butt trying to throw her weight around and demanded she leave. Now that lady is threatening to sue grandma if she refuses. Next one is titled, "Who Says That? God, I Hate HOAs. Packs of first world, spoiled Muppets who don't know what a real problem is. They all need to go do some mission work in war zones. I used to have these 3 condos in a complex here in Scottsdale. Super cool old building. Lots of snowbirds, who are retired folks that come down here for the winter and clog the roads with large cars moving slowly and erratically. I was perpetually in trouble with the HOA most months over some tenant bull, so I made it a point to go to the meetings to face the disciplinary committee and talk my way out of a fine. So silly. And if we're being honest, I made it a point to hit happy hour first, just to be able to put up with these clowns. So, true story. I'm at a meeting, and this crusty old fart from Minnesota stands up and yells at the president of our HOA, who was actually a good dude and tried hard, at the top of his lungs, "Can you please tell the brown fella not to cut the grass so short next to my patio?" I mean, seriously? That just came out of your mouth, in front of 200 people, and is now digitally recorded in the minutes of the meeting? Never mind, the brown fella is some poor Latino landscaper, busting his butt in the Arizona sunshine for probably $12 per hour, and you shuffle your butt up front and yell at the top of your voice for that. For the record, I totally lost it and laughed my tail off. I mean, what else can you do? I'm guessing the Upright Citizens Brigade there wasn't pleased, but seriously, who cares? I talked my way out of the fine for that month and sold those places soon after. No more HOAs for me. Ever. I hope they all cannibalize each other. Next one is titled, "No Photos Please." Living under an HOA in Arizona. I had just arrived home from work, dropped off a few things in the house, then went outside to collect the weekly bundle of flyers. It was late evening, maybe 7 p.m., but still light outside. I was standing in my driveway while a slow-moving car drove by with a person in the passenger seat taking photos or videos with their cell phone. We had an HOA, but not a gated community, so this could be anyone. I took my own cell phone out and took a photo of the car, occupants, and license plate. They came around again, slowly, and the woman taking the photos said, "Don't take my picture," which ensured that I definitely took her picture. The car stopped and I took a few steps back into the garage. I left my weapon inside the house when I dropped off my laptop bag, but I was fully prepared that this was the next step. I continued recording as this woman got out from the near side of the street, phone in hand, telling me that she was from the HOA and she had the right to take my picture. Seeing that she wasn't armed, I stepped forward to tell her that while that is true, she's on a public street so I can take her picture. Since I don't recognize either her or her car, I took their picture to ensure that this wasn't someone casing the neighborhood for potential targets for burglary. She rattled on about this while I closed the garage door and went inside. Had the man in the driver's seat gotten up, I would have likely retreated to get my weapon. This is Arizona, you can't be too careful. A few days later, I got a letter from the HOA, indicating that I was not to take pictures of HOA employees doing their job and warning me not to do so again. It wasn't worth the paper it was printed on, so I ignored it. Yes, I was reprimanded for taking photos of a slow-moving car in my neighborhood, on a public street. The following month, we get a letter that traffic is too fast and there will be a traffic study. The HOA puts up a sign with a radar collecting information. The speed limit is 25 miles per hour. The sign with the radar, however, is at ground level. Anyone can walk up to it. Not all radars are well shielded, and there have been cases of police officers getting testicular cancer because they sat in their patrol car, with their radar in their lap, radiating high-frequency radio waves. I work in the defense industry and I know a thing or two about radar. I sent a letter of complaint to the HOA. It is ignored. The traffic study finishes and the HOA says that they will be putting up traffic calming measures. The HOA declares that they don't need approval and that the study was disturbing. They have a contractor to install speed bumps on the asphalt road in several places, but they are too tall. There are standards for speed bumps based on speed. We had these massive 10 miles per hour bumps, with poor lighting, and no pass-through for bicycles. I write a letter of complaint, and it's ignored. Then I post on the HOA forum about calling a meeting for this. I get the required 10 signatures and the meeting is on. Just mention the word, cancer, and kids can walk up to this and people jump. Maybe there was some fear-mongering there, but those radar signs are not cheap to rent and the data collection also costs money. The HOA quickly sends out letters apologizing for the inconvenience. The speed bumps will be removed and the HOA pleasantly introduces its new manager to us. The old manager is gone. Here is what happened. 1. HOA manager arranges the traffic study after a few legitimate complaints about people speeding. 2. HOA manager hires a contracting firm, owned by her brother-in-law, to put in speed bumps. 3. The contractor is unlicensed for this work, not qualified for it, and most importantly, installs speed bumps on a public road with no permit. Remember when I said that it wasn't a gated community? Well, only in gated communities are the roads private, meaning that they are privately maintained. The HOA here couldn't put a speed bump on the road any more than they could change the speed limit. 4. One of our neighbors works for ADOT, Arizona Department of Transportation, and thought something was funny about it too. 5. ADOT investigates and tells the contractor to remove the speed bumps, at their expense, immediately. Oh, and they were facing fines for working without a permit. 6. The contractor tries to charge the HOA for removing the speed bumps. The parent company of the HOA, owned by the subdivision builder, as there were still unsold units, gets wind of this. 7. The contractor gets nothing. The HOA administrator is fired for not using the proper bid and tender process for contracts. Oh, and ADOT has her on their naughty list for telling the contractor, in writing, that she had the permits. The new admin and the HOA were actually very easy to deal with. All emails were answered in 3 days and there was no issue with any permits. Last one is titled, Drinking Ban. In my very first condo building, one of the other residents didn't like me. Most people also didn't like her, but she was a lawyer, she told everyone. I knew she was just starting law school, so they deferred to her. She somehow convinced them that they didn't need to do the 2 things required for association meetings per the laws in my area. Send a notice of the meeting date, time, and location to all owners at the address the association has for them by mail and post a notice of the same in public areas of the building that all owners can access, both at least 21 days in advance. They held an association meeting that specifically excluded me and 2 other owners using this tactic. Keep in mind this was an 8-unit building, so excluding 3 units from representation meant that they didn't have a 2/3, 67% vote, which is required for many things. During that association meeting, they passed 3 rules, 2 of which were completely bunk because they were amendments to the bylaws which required a paper ballot, mailed, which at least 2/3 of owners agreed to. 1. Any owner who did not park their car in their designated parking spot at least 3 nights a week forfeited the use of that parking space to the association to assign or use as they saw fit. Parking spots were limited common elements, and any amendment to their use constituted a change to the bylaws. I and 1 other owner did not own cars, but occasionally let friends park in our spaces. The car owners wanted our spaces for guests of their own. To best accomplish this, resident use spaces could only be used by a car the owner notified the association they possessed, with the license plate and VIN and proof of ownership by a resident, at least 2 weeks prior to that car parking in the space. Guests could not use resident spaces, nor could owners for rental cars. 2. No one could consume adult beverages on the premises within plain view of other residents. This was precipitated by an uber-religious owner who kept us, heathens, out of the association meeting. Everyone thought this meant in just the common spaces, but they were wrong. Banning having a cold one in our big yard was bad enough, but this owner meant if she could see you at all. So, I ended up being the first one, rung up, about it. Since I didn't even know the rule had passed, minutes and vote results were also not mailed as required by law. She had our management company blowing up my phone on a Friday evening about having a drink on my private balcony. She could see me from the parking lot, that was, in plain view of other residences, and I needed to stop. But wait, there's more. A neighbor on the first floor was sitting on her couch having a glass of vino when Ms. Perfect walked up to the main door of the building. Her blinds were open, which violates the rules. She either has to close her blinds or stop drinking inside her own home. 3. The building was sold as pet-friendly, with no restrictions. The lawyer neighbor moved in a big, poorly mannered dog just before said association meeting where they excluded several of us. She then proposed to ban all pets, even down to a goldfish in a bowl, except those already in the building. The allowance of pets was actually written into the bylaws, unusual, but it does happen, so, again violating the bylaws except for her own benefit. I was in the process to adopt a dog at that time, appropriate to a small condo and less than 1/3 the size of hers, and I only found out about the bylaw change when I asked the management company for a letter stating dogs were allowed to present to the rescue. Thankfully, all this was resolved pretty quickly when the three of us who were excluded from the meeting and a fourth who objected to most of the rule changes paid a lawyer friend of mine to write a simple letter asking for proof the meeting and bylaw changes had been properly conducted. The lawyer girl sent a letter back saying, without proof, they had, but upon further insistence. The management company stepped in and said that the proof was not there. They begged us to not sue, since they would be on the hook for not conducting the meeting properly, and asked for permission to redo the association meeting, with proper notice, in a proper place, and with proper balloting for bylaw changes. We agreed. All measures failed when properly voted upon, and the lawyer could only get revenge on us through disapproving stares and putting their units up for rent as soon as they could afford something else. Thanks for listening.